Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. It is Sunday, so it is another edition of our Watchmen Challenge. Mike and I this year taking 10, maybe 11. We're getting some recommendations, so we might go 11. Challengers to see what is the greatest graphic novel of all time. Mike and I spent 12 weeks breaking down Watchmen, discussing it chapter by chapter, then did a video where we discussed its overall legacy. I believe YouTube's actually turned that into a podcast as well, and we're going to link each episode every Sunday to that. So if you want to follow along with us, it's there. The first challenger for Watchmen for me and Mike was DC's The New Frontier, the classic work from Darwyn Cooke. I'm reading the compact version, which you guys can pick up if you want to follow along. Mike, you've got one of the more classic versions there as well, with lots of goodies in there. We're going two chapters at a time. Darwyn kind of does a unique thing in this book. It releases 6 issues, but he releases 2 chapters in chapters. And so we're just going 2 at a time. We're on part 6, covering chapters 11 and 12. We've had kind of a lot of events happening in this book. You have some interesting integration of kind of McCarthyism and superheroes being forced into retirement. A little bit of Watchmen-esque in that brand. And so, as we left off in our last chapter, Hal Jordan is now Green Lantern. Wonder Woman has been isolated from humanity. Superman is still serving the government. We've got a lot of vigilantes on the run. And this looming threat of the center is sort of coming in more and more into focus as we go. And so we pick up with chapter 11. Mike, we start kind of uniquely with about 4 pages sort of out of this book or document that Bruce has been talking about. He got it from John Jones. And we get some sort of perspective on the center. How did you feel about how Darwyn's starting off chapter 11 with that?
I think it's been kind of teased that there's this imminent threat. So we know something ominous is coming, but we don't really know the scope of it until this chapter, these 2 chapters. And it is much bigger than what was teased. In other words, the first 10 chapters, we're getting to know these characters and getting introduced to this amazing world. It has its problems because it is 1950s America, but Darwyn introduces us into character after character, his version of the greats, as well as some of these second and third tier characters that largely go unknown, like, the challengers of the unknown, the losers, these groups of characters that were either created in the 50s or were created in the 60s but planted in the 40s and 50s in the timeline, like a lot of the war characters. Darwyn ties up all the continuity and makes it seamless and lets these characters perform in this story brilliantly, I might add. And so here we are. So this now we're seeing the center for the first time, and we're kind
Mhm.
of understanding what's going on. And it's crazy. It's affecting the minds of everybody around the world. Some people are more susceptible to it than others, including Martian Manhunter, John Jones,
Mhm.
is very susceptible to it, but is able to maintain control. But this is this is kind of a ominous, dark, you know, storyline where apparently the center feels that humanity has wronged it and now it needs to cleanse the earth of humanity. What?
Yeah, no, it certainly does a good job in setting up a threat for that would be very difficult for all the different characters of the DC universe to tackle. And I would say my first few readings of this, the whole center concept was sort of the part I struggled with. But as you read it more, you can tell Darwyn is building this up, and there's a lot more build up that I remember that kind of works. I do love it, kind of taking out a page out of Watchmen. You get sort of the journal type pages, and that felt a little bit of Alan Moore-esque there, where you're getting some of that detail. And I think that's one of the reasons that this is an easy book to contrast to it. But no, I love that he took some time to dedicate to that, and that I would say until this chapter, that threat always seems sort of vague, like it's just being brought up out of nowhere. And this is where it really starts to come into focus what we're going to have in this epic conclusion. Um, we go from that scene to basically Gotham, where we get a meetup of Batman and Superman. And again, this is where I would say Darwyn stands out so much. And I think his writing is a real strength. But just this panel of Batman, Superman, and Robin meeting, the thing that he does so well, it feels like every era of those characters is in that panel somehow. And that if you're a fan of any of the early age artists of Darwyn somehow has a style that just amalgamates it all together so brilliantly. And I love the interaction. I think that's one of the things he captures so well. The friendship dynamic between Batman and Superman that just sort of plays out over those next 3 or 4 pages. Batman Superman friendship's the most important part of DC Comics, in my opinion. The world's finest. They are the, Wonder Woman and those two are the Trinity. They define the universe. Darwyn to me has almost a better voice for that relationship in these small panels than almost anybody else, and that is
Well,
respectful colleagues who trust each other. You see the excitement of Robin. I just thought he did such a great job. What were your thoughts on it, Mike?
it is such a contrast because when he was writing this, I think it was 2004, 2005.
Mhm.
Um, at this point in time, that relationship between those two characters was completely broken, torn asunder, taken advantage of, ripped up, thrown on the floor, thrown into trash. And it was astonishing what they did with it over the years. And to see it back where it should be, it took Darwyn Cooke to put it back there, and because he had a love for it, and he understood that that's how these two characters should interact.
Yeah. No, it's refreshing when you see a writer get it, and that there's been so much upset. And I say this as a Batman fan, but I love Superman. And some of it's Frank Miller with his Batman versus Superman thing that kind of, I don't blame Frank for it. That was a great conflict for that Elseworld story he was telling. But sadly, like a lot of great Elseworld stuff, modern comics couldn't leave it alone. And so Batman and Superman, I think was Infinite Crisis. They were kind of at each other's throats. You had Tower of Babel, where Batman's designing plans that almost kill members of the Justice League, even though he didn't enact them. You just started having where the characters didn't feel like the friends they should be, or like colleagues even who trusted each other. And so, like you
Yeah,
said, yeah, it's great that that's there. I also just love the pages of Dick Grayson being so excited to meet Superman. I think that's so cool when they feature that and kind of have that. Like
yeah,
again, if you were a teenage, there's times that Darwyn just does things that's so obvious. If you
yeah,
were a teenager and you were going to meet Superman,
yeah,
how excited would you be? Even if you know Batman and all that, you can tell.
yeah,
I thought that was just such a great touch that he has. I also love the little art touches in here, like the Batmobile parked there in this panel where it's in the shadow, and you can kind of tell he's going with that classic
yeah.
Batmobile vibe. Just
That's the
great panels.
classic Dick Sprang version of the Batmobile.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah,
just such a cool thing from him. We get a brief tease of Wonder Woman being reintroduced in the story because previously she'd left off. She had kind of renounced man's world, sort of thing, told Clark, hey, man, this world doesn't really represent what I want anymore. Sort of leaving. We see sort of a looming threat for her, just a couple cool panels.
I
Um,
love that panel right there where she's like, "What is that off in the distance?"
mhm.
Yeah, because the center comes to Paradise Island.
Darwyn's Wonder Woman, I think, is probably one of the coolest design concepts for the character in that where he does such a great job. And I think Wonder Woman, there's somewhat George Perez is obviously the most famous one, probably that nailed the Wonder Woman design. There's others who've done a great job. Where Darwyn does such a good job, and I think this is where Wonder Woman's such a challenging character. There is a tendency to either make her this beefy gladiator type character, or to draw her as too slimmed down and like the sex appeal vibe of the character too much. Darwyn perfectly combines them both. Where he draws her as this gorgeous gladiator figure, but that's a strong kind of build. And I think it's one of the best designs of Wonder Woman any artist has done, and that he captures this again what he does so well with all the characters. This great amalgamation of like if you like any aspect of Wonder Woman, he kind of gives it to you with the panels. And I thought just for 3 panels again, it's just always so cool to see him draw that character, and he's one
Yeah,
of the real greats at drawing Wonder Woman.
I think so too. I think so too. And then we lead up to this. There's some more character development to come with King Faraday and John Jones.
Well,
You know,
Chad game, funny brought you into perspective. It kind of was Magneto, Xavier, kind of
yeah,
on the Fox movies.
yeah, a little bit, yeah,
Yeah. We kind of see building trust. And again, one of the things I think Darwin does so good, and where this did remind me of Watchmen a little bit as I was reading this. Moore's ability in every issue, he would put 2 or 3 panels in, or 2 or 3 pages in, of the newspaper vendor talking with that kid, just as this running thread. And it wasn't really until issue 11, I think, of Watchmen, where that finally came to a head, and you understood why we were spending so much time on those
yeah,
characters. Darwin does such a good job of every issue John is present, right? In some issues it's really prevalent, others it's not. But the character development that John Jones goes throughout this journey with and how he affects other people around him. I love that he was so emphasized that and that you and I have often talked about how many great characters there are on DC. Darwin's really one who seems to understand that. And his commitment to put John Jones front and center in the story, it's really, really cool. It reminds you of how important John Jones is in that Brave and the Bold 28, where you've got all those, the final, the Justice League thing, Aquaman, Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, they've all kind of gotten their own titles for years.
yeah,
John's hugely important to DC. He just never gets that in that reputation. And so it's really cool to see a creator spotlight him as much as he does. We kind of close. We get some pretty cool Superman action scenes fighting sort of a pterodactyl-esque looking monster, and Mike, I think this is where Darwyn Cooke is just really great in that these are just fun panels. Superman fighting a dinosaur. Again, sometimes Darwin just does things where it's like this is what a little kid would do with action figures, and yet it's done well.
yeah.
How'd you think about him handling the Superman portion there?
I loved it. You got to see your superheroes win sometimes, and uh I mean ultimately they should always win. It makes for an interesting story or two here and there when they don't, and we learn something and we grow with the character, and that's what makes it interesting. So I'll just leave it at that. It's good to see, see them have a win here and there. And then the, probably your favorite part of the book, and I know you're really enjoying the current Aquaman, but there's some interesting Aquaman panels here where I don't think he's been in this. This is his intro into the story,
Into
right?
the story, we get this
Yeah.
great kind of splash page shot of him with all the hammerhead sharks.
Oh
And
my
again, it's just
gosh, it's so cool.
Darwin's ability to capture different characters, different environments, different. I think that's what I read the New Frontier. What really stands out to me is I do think there's some legit criticisms of some of the story beats taking a little bit too much time, where I don't accept much criticism on this story. His art on every panel, and I think the cool thing with him is, and I'll critique my favorite artist is Jim Lee. But Jim Lee, basically the body of every character, if you take the costume, the Flash is built the same way as Batman. Batman's built the same as Superman. Superman's built the same as Aquaman. Heck, even Green Lantern looks as big as Batman. And again, I love Jim Lee, but he has that issue. Darwyn Cooke draws all of these characters so uniquely, and even Aquaman, it's like he's kind of bulky, but he's slender. He's not built like Batman. He's not built like Superman. The way he captures one, he just does such a good job of drawing distinct characterizations of these characters that instantly are recognizable if you're a fan of them.
Yeah.
And I give him a ton of credit for that. And that's where this does stand up quite a bit for me as a classic. And that from an art standpoint, my goodness, this book has so much great stuff in it. We pivot to chapter 12. We gotta get the conclusion of Superman fighting that monster. And then we see Wonder Woman's return. And Wonder Woman's not in good thing. And I think one again cool image. We get the invisible jet Wonder Woman flying, and she's just covered in blood. outside of it. Um, this whole redemption thing of our kind of reunion of Superman and Wonder Woman, like how do you feel this was integrated into the story?
This blew me away, even though this is probably like the fourth time I've read it. I don't know why it hit me harder this time. And I think it's because, you know, uh, in their first initial meeting in this story, they come across as adversarial. They have a clash of cultures and ideas there in Indochina,
Hmm.
and um, and so we leave it at that, and you kind of think that they're not friends.
Yeah.
And then this scene here, this splash page is amazing. Amazing. He pulls her out of the wreckage. Obviously something's gone terribly wrong on Paradise Island. We got that little hint of it, but we didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
We just saw Diana looking off into the distance as something approached Paradise Island. But
Hmm.
um, it's just amazing. So you really get to understand that they really truly have a good relationship and that it's amazing.
No, the
Uh,
facial expressions he captures on both of those characters, and again, this is where I think his background as an animator and different things that he did really stand out in this comic in that there's a cool amount of human emotion in the facial expressions of Superman and Wonder Woman in those panels. But you can tell it's two old friends. If you just drew that and you kind of removed the costumes and you just saw just a silhouette of the faces, he just does such a good job of imbuing those with emotion. And I think that's such a lost thing in comic books that we don't get as much of anymore, of that ability to really capture that just with not with huge action shots, but just simply, kind of two folks talking. I thought that was really cool.
and the drama that builds in these few pages is really masterfully done. So we get this ominous story about the center thing at the beginning, and then and they fought these dinosaurs off a time or two in previous chapters. And it's kind of business as usual. Superman takes care of another one. But then, when Diana crashes in front of Superman and she's a mess,
Hmm.
you know the threat, and then you see how it's affecting the sea creatures with
Yeah,
Aquaman. So now, it's up a notch. Like, what could take out an island full of super Amazonian women?
yeah.
It's got to be, so now we understand how the stakes are and how high they are and how powerful a foe they're about to come up against.
And then we get some of the best art in the comic, and we pivot to where we end the two chapters we're going to focus on today. We get kind of this news report with Lois Lane about the emerging threat of the center, and you just get this amazing, even in this compact edition, this two-page black and white sort of splash page that we get. And what's really cool to me about that splash page is it's Darwyn using a different art style in that
Yeah.
the other ones are a little Herbie-esque, a little bigger, a little real colorful. When he does that black and white, man, you really see a different sort of, there's so much detail. It's one of the cooler shots in the book, even though it's just kind of this giant menacing thing lifting out of the ocean, but it's such a cool panel to see. And I think that's the versatility he brings to this, and I just thought that was a really cool way to, after building threat and building threat. And I think what he did really well with this threat of the center, um, it reminded me of one of the best horror movies. I consider it a horror movie, The Predator. And that one of the things Darwyn does so well is in the Predator movie, the greatest thing about that film is they don't show you much of Predator. He's kind of
Yeah.
in camouflage and you see glimpses of the show. And it's not really until the end where Arnold's face to face with him that you see the full creature with the full armor. And it's such a cool, subtle reveal because your mind is trying to tell you what does this thing actually look like. And I think that's what Darwyn did such a cool job where you get this reveal of what is this threat? I keep saying we get these weird scenes on the island, we get these weird scenes where it's coming and people talking about it. And then it's fully revealed, and it's like, wow, that's a really. I thought the
And
subtle reveal of it and the way it built was so cool.
and the device he uses is the fearless Lois Lane
Hmm.
ordering the helicopter pilot to take what would have been a black and white TV camera out there to see what it is. Like she's got to see it. And so we get this fuzzy, grainy, staticky black and white image as she's broadcasting and ordering the corporal to turn that camera around. We've got to get this on, and she's just fearless, which adds to her character. Ultimately, she gets overridden and they turn the helicopter around, thank goodness. But they're on their way back. But you get this fearless reporting, just like when she was out in Korea and they pulled up on Hal and saved him in his, when he parachuted into the trenches there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great way to end the chapter. And again, I think just the big standout for me as we read this, Darwyn's art, man. I think sometimes you think you kind of see if you've seen one Darwyn Cooke image, you've seen them all. Not the case, man. He uses so many cool different devices and uses of shadow and different. And I love the use of the black and white for dramatic effect in here. And like you said, it just captures something cinematic or thematic there that really hits. It's a really good place to end it on. And Mike, any closing thoughts on it before we close this one out?
No, I just want to hear from some of the watchers. Are you stepping through this chapter at a time with us? Let us know what your thoughts are below.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week with 13 and 14. And then I think we'll do what the last couple chapters are pretty short. So we'll probably have a part 7 for 13 and 14, and maybe an eighth part to kind of close it out before we do our final analysis and breakdown of whether this holds up to Watchmen. Let us know, though, folks, if you enjoyed the video, if you like what's going on with the New Frontier. Let us know your thoughts, agree or disagree. We just love hearing what you guys are thinking down below. As always, folks, thank you for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.